first of all, thank you very much all for joining me and taking the time out of your busy days to join me on this roundtable event. So today we're going to be covering the topic of perfection versus pragmatism in the software development process. And I'm really excited to be joined by 4 of the top engineering leaders from across both Denmark and Sweden. So I'll give you a quick intro into everybody that's here, and I'll ask them to do a bit more of a detailed intro on themselves straight afterwards. So first of all, we have Becki Wordsworth, who some of you may know in Stockholm. She does a lot of public speaking, is involved in Stockholm JS, and is currently an engineering manager for Flight Radar 24. We also have Markus, I nearly called you Markus Abtion then because if you zoom in, Markus Obelitz, who's the senior engineering manager at Abtion, who are one of the more established digital agencies in Denmark. We have Esteban, who's the CTO of AltaPay, a fintech business in Copenhagen. And last but not least, we have Henrik Holm, who's an engineering manager for Danish energy startup Lund. Becki, I came to you first, and you're on the top left of my screen, so we'll come to you first if that's okay. Would you mind just giving everyone a bit more of a detailed intro on yourself and where we are today?
Sure. Okay, yeah. My name is Becki. I am currently engineering manager at Flight Radar 24. We do tracking of planes around the world. I'm turning that into data and kind of applications for people to be able to follow the flights and the data that comes with that. My background is super diverse. This is engineering is my 3rd career move in my life. So I started off as in academic research, working in medical physics. I moved into being a technical recruiter, and then 6 years ago, I decided I wanted to be an engineer. So I quit my job in recruitment and quickly retrained and have been working as a full stack engineer for the last 6 years now, and most recently in leadership positions, so in the last couple of roles as well. So yeah, that's a very quick intro to where I am at the moment.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Becki. Markus, we'll come to you next, if that's okay.
Sure. Becki, good to hear. I live right next to the Copenhagen airport, so I can see the flights. I track them from my window. But good to know that there's a service as well. I'm Markus Obelitz. I work in a digital agency called Abtion. Been working there for 5 years, maybe. Yeah, a bit over 5 years. We work with clients across the industry, from startups to what's called big scale, major scale companies. And sort of one of the fun fact about our process is that we work a lot with the extreme programming as an agile framework, which I think will be something I mention later in the conversation as well. So that's
awesome.
Me.
Thank you very much. Esteban, how about you?
Yeah, sure. Hey guys, I'm Esteban. I'm a software engineer and solution architect by career, let's put it that way. And I became a CTO in AltaPay, where I look at both technical strategy and product strategy of the company. And what AltaPay does is it's a payment service provider. So we provide an API to the merchants that they can use to process payments both online and in-store. And we also have a platform where they can do post-processing operations, reporting, data analytics, and stuff like that. Thank you, Jamie, for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. And finally, Henrik.
Yes, hello. My name is Henrik. I'm working as an engineering manager at Lund Energy, which is an early stage startup. So I joined actually right after they got their first round of funding. So we're still at the seed stage, trying to find the right product market fit. So trying a lot of different stuff to get the rapid feedback, you could say. So what we try in Lund is we build sort of B2B software for to help decarbonize homes faster. So that means right now we're looking into building a heat pump software, so it's easier to get installed a heat pump, for instance, at your house. And I have a background in a computer science background. I worked mainly as a back engineer in my whole career, and I've been in the whole startup ecosystem mostly in my career.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Henrik, we came to you last there, so I'll stick with you for this first question, if that's okay.
Yes.
Would you say you're a perfectionist or a pragmatist?
I would say I'm a pragmatist, definitely.
Pragmatist. Okay.
Yeah.
Who else would feel comfortable in agreeing that they're a pragmatist as a software engineer?
I do as well. I think the answer will be a little bit longer, but in principle, I do agree as well.
Okay.
Yeah, similar kind of feedback. I think I have moved in that direction over my career, from going from individual contributor to now kind of management. And I think that has led me from perfectionism more towards a pragmatic view on things.
Oh, interesting. What's the change been, do you think? What's the reason that it's kind of driven you towards that?
I think being able to see the bigger picture. I think when you first come in and you're kind of an individual contributor, you're just seeing your parts of what you're doing, and everyone wants to do well, and they want to kind of, you know, make it perfect. And, you know, we all learn as we grow as well, but nothing's ever perfect, but you want to do that. And then as I've kind of gone up from kind of tech lead and then into kind of more management positions, you kind of see more of the bigger picture, and you see what is important and what's not important. And also, I've worked a lot in startups and scale-ups, and you have to be pragmatic in that area. You don't have the opportunity to be perfect all the time.
Yeah, would you say it's similar for you, Esteban?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, Becki, you are spot on. It's more about moving away from an individual contributor to actually then having to play a role on a bigger, you know, picture. And sometimes it's not because you are a manager necessarily or team lead, anything like that. It's just that you start seeing where the solution is going to, and you're trying to make sure that you really take a step back when something is really, really important and maybe hard to change in the future. And you want to be able to move fast and reiterate all the time whenever you are in the short term. I will say though, I mean, the issue with pragmatism normally is that your horizon view might be very short term compared to maybe what a perfectionist would do. So sometimes you might take a decision short term to move fast that is not necessarily going to it's going to get you ahead short term, but then it's going to be a headache in the long term. And then, you know, maybe a manifestation of that is having patches over patches over patches on the system that is not really breaking anything, but it's just making it harder and harder to maintain, or adding more and more complexity. And you might actually try to take that back when it's a little bit too late. We have these famous refactorings that then takes months, you know, or years just to get it done. But I will say I'm more of a pragmatic. I think that I would prefer to iterate and take decisions based on that. On the other hand, I think that with perfectionism, the issue is that you might procrastinate, in the sense that there is a million ways that you can do something, and they all have different trade-offs. And therefore, you can spend a very long time trying to figure out what is the perfect way to do it. Whereas in reality, you could have just got started, you know, do something and then reiterate for that. I think there is a concept of a culture in Japan that is called Kaizen, which is like you get 1% better at a time. And I really, really resonate with that, to be honest. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's it's a really good point, Trace. And I've heard that phrase before, and I was never 100% sure what it meant. So thank you for clarifying that. Henrik, you said you're a pragmatist as well. How would you kind of define your kind of process with that?
Yeah, no, but I agree with what both Becki and Esteban already said. I think definitely that you get a closer to higher level decision as you go up the chain, and you actually figure out what actually is important, right? As you pointed out, Becki, I think that's important. But I also think there's a lot of trade-offs, as you all said, but I also think it matters a lot of what stage you are at the company, but also what type of company it is, right? How mission critical is the software you're building? First, like to have bugs or whatnot, right? This is also a core part of it, I think. Especially the stage Luke is at right now, we're trying to find a product market fit, and that actually means sometimes you build a lot of code which can be thrown in the garbage 3 months later, right? So it's really important that you don't think too much about your code at this point, right? And try to find the right abstractions. It's more about ensuring you get the feedback quickly, and then you can iterate from that, right? Of course, I think it's still important to still have some core fundament, which can easily be built on top and thrown some away and build new stuff, right? So it's not, so in that sense, some part of it still needs to be thought more about, I think, sort of high level architecture, how you build things, right? But necessarily how you build a specific feature, I don't think that's super important, at least not at the stage we're at. I think it differs, right, as you go further up and get more scale up. I think it's funny because I'll just give you some, in my company, we have people who work only in the startup, and we got some people from Pleo, for instance, which is a pretty successful tech company in Copenhagen, right? And you can definitely see they have a completely different mindset about the the thing about these things, like staff engineers here, they are so worried about people going in different direction, and they really want to ensure people do everything the same way, and they'll have so much process about do these things this way, right? So it's also fun to experience, like people have different experience and with these type of things, and what they value or what they find is important.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point on being able to see and like differentiate like people's backgrounds based on their approach is something that is the main reason why I set up this whole conversation, is because when I speak with businesses, they'll always have a preference for, do they need someone who's pragmatic at the moment, or do they need someone who's there to refine things and be a little bit of a perfectionist? And I think we'll come to it later, but I think it's really interesting in like how you can see that and what the kind of process of actually being able to spot that. But yeah, and Markus, I know we haven't come to you yet. Obviously, you're in an interesting situation at the moment because you're working for an agency. How does that differ things to maybe everyone else's current situation?
It doesn't sound like it's very different. I mean, so we work on many different projects, and a lot of the time is about finding out what works for that project. And of course, that's where the pragmatism comes in, because we have to build things, see if it works with the client. A lot of our progress or process is small features all the time, small iterations. So of course we have to like try something. How does it work with the client? Refactor it. How does it work with the client now? So in that sense, I think like pragmatism is the way to go. But of course, we can't just go with pragmatism, because we would just build systems that would be chaotic. So that won't happen unless you have like a foundation, as Henrik talked about. And I think that's where sort of the workflow has to be structured in a certain way, or something else. Like there has to be a foundation in some fashion, either with templates or ways to do it through code or through the workflow, I think.
Got you. And just on that kind of point, I mean, because I think everyone's made a point of mentioning that, it does depend on the situation that you're in. How would you kind of define a changing point? Let's say that you start out with the idea of, I'm going to build this perfect feature, I'm going to build this perfect product and deliver it. What would make you change your approach? What would make you actually think, maybe I need to take a step back here and really kind of think about how this is going to
go? In my case?
Yeah, I'll come to you and then we'll go to everybody else.
Sure. Actually, let someone else begin.
Okay, who else? Esteban, we'll come to you.
Yeah, I mean, if I try to oversimplify it as much as I can, for me is how hard or how easy it is to actually take this decision back. So if this is very easy to move away from in the future, let's just try to get it done. Let's try to quickly analyze what is the next step that we need to take, and then try to take it. And then we will iterate from that. Now, if this decision is going to be very, very hard to change in the future, that's when I think that you really want to have high standards. You want to have attention to detail. You want to really analyze all the options and try to validate them by prototyping or building vertical slices or anything like that before you actually move on. So, for example, when we got the company back in 2020, well, that's maybe a long story, but we have to move the servers away from the old owner. And the problem with that is that obviously not only we need to do a migration, but we need to decide where we're going to migrate to. There was different options like on-prem or lift and shift with VMware or going to the cloud. That's not a decision that you want to take lightly. And that's the type of decision where you want to bring perfectionism to the equation and make sure that you take the best decision, because it's going to be very, very hard to move away from that later on. But even when you do approach like this as a perfectionist, you're still taking a pragmatic approach on the details, right? And you are trying to move very fast along the way.
Sorry, Becki, were you going to jump in there?
No, I was just wanted to follow up. I agree wholeheartedly. And I think for me, it also kind of depends on the area that I'm looking at that point, about whether or not I'm going to be more perfectionist or more pragmatic. So in some cases to do with kind of security, or in this case, kind of infrastructure, especially if it's the foundation, then I'm going to be kind of leaning more towards the perfectionism part of it and making sure that that is right. And then something else, if we're trying to kind of build a quick MVP or something else, there's something that we can kind of do, then I'm probably going to lean more towards the kind of pragmatic part of it. I mean, there's some cases where you falls between the chairs and you don't know kind of which way you should go. But that's kind of the rule of thumb that I have. Like, there's certain things that I need to be a bit more focused on the perfectionism part of it, make sure we don't have security vulnerabilities, things like that. And then kind of when we're focusing on kind of other projects, like we just talked about, kind of, is this something that we can change easily in the future? Is this kind of going to lock us into the way forward? Then you can kind of think about more of the pragmatism side of it.
Nice. I really like that. I think you both raised really good points. That is not something I thought about actually, in terms of different parts of a product or different parts of a process actually being considered on different ends of the spectrum. Because like you say, security is not something that you can just experiment with. That's something that needs locking down. Otherwise, that could be the end of your business. So definitely something to take a perfectionist approach with. I know, Henrik, before you mentioned about being able to see the difference in people based on kind of environments they've been in before as well. Let's say it comes to, you're interviewing for a position at the moment, you're looking to bring somebody into your team. What are some of the things that you could look out for? What are some of the ways that you could analyze them or test them to see where they kind of fall into perfection versus pragmatism? What are some of the things that you could maybe ask them or look into?
That's a good question, actually. Of course, I think experience plays a big role here, honestly. Also, what most recent experience, at least that's what I have experienced with the people I've worked with. People are a little biased towards what they have done the last 2-3 years, probably, or in the last company. People are easy to drag that over, even though it's a new context, right? So at least that's what I'm trying to ask a lot about these things, to try to get the right signals here. What else can I say?
Do you think technical challenges, or I know coding tests are a big hoo-ha in the industry, but
of course you could the pair program session, for instance, with the Kenny can also give you some idea of how they think about coding, right? In terms of, but also for instance, I've used home coding challenges a lot, where I had to do some small project at home, right, as an assignment, and that's also gives some good indication of how they think about code, because I try to be very explicit when I give the assignment what I think I value, right? And sometimes you can feel people are focused maybe too much on the wrong thing sometimes, right? So this gives me at least also somehow how they think about it and what's actually important. Do they understand the assignment correctly and stuff? Because some people can tend, if it's simple exercise, to over-engineer on purpose, right? Because they want to impress. Whereas actually, that's what I don't want to see, because that was not the idea of the intent. That was not my intention, right? Or to get
that. It's a really good point. It's especially with a challenge, like you say, the aim of a challenge is to impress the person that you're sending it to. And in some ways you have to kind of take a step down and not do your absolute best work, because that's not what the company needs or not what you want to see, which I imagine is quite difficult to explain to somebody. We want you to do good, but not too good. So that's an interesting way to look at things. And I imagine it's quite a difficult one to kind of manage and explain to people. Esteban, did you have something to add there? Sorry.
Yeah, something to add to what Henrik was saying is that we also have a technical test. It's a small project, very simple, a couple of to-dos, nothing else. We do this because we don't care so much about whether the solution is right or wrong. It's more about trying to understand what are the trade-offs that the person analyzes when they are taking decisions, and try to figure out what are the things that they really care about when they are actually building the code. So it happened to us that we had to start saying specifically to the potential candidates, please don't use more than an hour, because this is very simple. A lot of people tend to over-engineer, or as you were saying, trying to impress the person that is going to be on the other side. And the reality, we were actually saying that, the goal here is to make sure that we understand how you think. So it's not about, trying to build a very complex solution. On the contrary, just try to make sure that you were implementing this as if you were doing this for an organization, and try to figure out your way in. Yeah.
How easy do you think it is to change someone's approach? Like, say, for example, you're doing maybe a like a quarterly review with someone and you can see, look, the work that you're doing is really good, but at the moment we really need to focus on speed. How would you go about that, and how easy do you think it is to change somebody and get them to look at things from your perspective? I'll put that one out to the floor if anyone's got that to throw in.
You want me to answer, or you are just opening this up?
Yeah,
for
it's
everyone?
open, but if you've got something to add, feel free. Yeah.
I actually don't know. I think that it is very fluid. I think that, good engineers will, try to find what makes sense for the organization that they're working in. So yeah, they might have some habits, or they might have some things that are bringing from other organizations that can also add to the culture of the company that they will be interviewed by, right? So I think that good engineers normally have that fluidity, and therefore it's not necessarily changing the approach or making it hard to change. It's just for them to realize that this company is going to value something different. Now, I'm not entirely sure if you are very wired into doing things in a specific way and you are not under the definition of a good engineer, then I'm not sure how easy that is to change. And I'm not sure how easy it is to change the attitude of a person.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Markus, I can see you've got your hand raised there. What were you going to add to that? Sorry.
Yeah, I think Esteban is right with the whole wiring thing. Like, I think it sometimes is so deeply trained into people's brains,
like ingrained into their way of working.
Yeah, exactly. And I think so. I teased a bit of extreme programming. I think one of the benefits of the whole pair programming thing is that you have like that second brain and that overview next to you that will sort of get you out of the perfectionism gutter. That's a wrong way of saying it, but to sort of help you, because I think I know it from myself. If I sit in a code thing, I'm just in a flow, and all of a sudden I do all the bad habits that I already have, or the habits that I already have that might not be bad, but in one of these cases where you need speed more, I think you need that second set of eyes to sort of navigate.
Just on that point, I know you mentioned extreme programming. It's not something I've heard of before. How would you kind of explain what that is and how it works?
So the whole thing is about having short feedback loops. So adding tests for having immediate feedback, pairing with someone to have feedback within minutes, small iterations to have feedback from clients within the day, basically. So in sort of it's like a good middle road. Of course, I say that I'm biased. It's like a good middle road between pragmatism and perfectionism, because you always have quick feedback to ensure that you have quality, or at least readability, which I think is sometimes the same. And it's a pragmatic approach, because you have to sort of make constant little changes and features.
Got you. Sorry, Becki, were you going to come in with something there?
Yeah, no, for me, I think people can change, and I do think that if you've got the right engineers, I mean, there's some people that are going to be stuck in their ways and there's nothing you can do. But if you have the right engineers, a lot of it is to do with the culture of the company as well. So if you can kind of demonstrate the ways you want to work in a good way, I mean, when we're talking about pragmatism, we're not talking about delivering, terrible code or anything like that. We're just talking about getting something done in a different way. And be able to kind of have the leadership there to kind of show people the way and show this is kind of good, and this is the way we want to work. We can still get quality, but we need to do it in this way, or something like that. I think that people tend to lean towards that. It's very hard to kind of say to people, don't be perfectionist, don't be this, don't be that, because they don't really know what that means. But that's why you need the leadership and a company culture that kind of shows that we still want quality, but we also need some pragmatism in that, and you lead by example as well, and people start to understand that and they start to move in that direction. And that's happened in a couple of places I've worked at as well, when people relax a little bit more and they don't think that they need to deliver to the top, because that's, especially when you start a new company, you want to kind of prove yourself and do those sort of things, and you just need to kind of lead the way and show people that that's not always necessary, and that actually it's about kind of working towards what the company needs and the company goals. One thing that makes people relax a bit more, because they can feel that around them and they know what's expected of them. And then they can kind of change in one way or the other. But yeah, there are going to be some people that are stuck in their ways as well that you can't change.
Yeah, that's a really good point raised there, and not something I'd really thought about in any particular depth. But if someone is kind of more leaning towards perfectionism, they've always kind of been in that realm, and then you start telling them they need to stop that, at what point do they then start delivering really high quality code again? Like, it's a bit of a slippery slope, isn't it? And trying to get them to strike the balance of, this is how I've always done things. You don't want them then to also drop their standards so much that then actually just start delivering terrible work. So that's a really interesting point. Markus, sorry, we'll come back to you.
Yeah, I just noted Becki mentioning this safe culture. Was that the word that you used? And that's a point that's, I just think was very important to like emphasize this, like building the trust to have people, because if you're a perfectionist and suddenly you're being told that you can't perfect your code, is horrible, because what's my reputation going to be if I start to deliver something that's not perfect, right? So I think that like building that trust where you can actually, where you think it's okay to try things off, tread new waters, make mistakes even, and sort of allowing that, I think it's very important. So that was just, I just wanted to like cheer on Becki.
Esteban, sorry, I can see you there as well.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with what Becki's saying, is that, I mean, as long as you show the team members what is that the company values and what is it that we're trying to achieve, then, it's very easy to get people on board and make sure that they're pulling in the same direction. I think for me, it's also, what I wanted to add is that sometimes it's hard to strike the balance. So you need to have some sort of external way to validate that you're actually moving in the right direction. So for example, what we used a lot is that, not to go into too much details, but we are measuring, for example, how much revenue-driven work we're doing constantly, right? So how many features are we releasing and how much that is going to yield for the organization in the future. But we also have on the other side metrics like failure rate, deployment frequency, incidents that we get raised, and also the time it takes for them to get resolved. These are the DORA metrics from Google, more or less. So you can actually see that maybe, yes, you're delivering a lot, but then finally you have a huge spike in failure rate. So maybe this is not so sustainable. So maybe we need to take a step down, maybe. And this is also a power of being pragmatic, right? So you're reiterating. So you see, okay, that's fine. This is what we value as an organization, but we can see on the other side that things are burning. So maybe we need to take a step back and say, okay, what is the place in the code that we're building that is actually failing the most or causing the most issues? Okay, let's take that and let's try to rethink that a little bit. How can we actually get this in a better place? And I think I like this because as a pragmatic, then you don't want to wait until the end when it's too late and things are basically on fire. But at the same time, you do want to wait to see where you're going to invest the time on the refactoring and the perfectionism, because the reality is that you might think that you want to invest here, but where you are going to have issues in 1 year is somewhere else. So therefore, you need to have that, balance and overview with these metrics or whatever you use. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, because you could spend 6 months on a thing, and you absolutely perfect it, but absolutely zero mistakes. You get 7 months down the line and you're like, actually, now we really don't need this, or now our customers ask for this to be implemented, we're just going to replace that. And then you've not wasted 6 months, but you've spent so much time really driving perfection when actually what you needed was probably something a little bit more basic that could be changed and adapted to what the customer or the client really needs. So no, that's really interesting. Henrik, come to you.
Yes, I was just to follow this engineering culture in terms of what you mentioned, Becki, because I've actually had experience where I pushed for the pragmatism, and one of the other engineering leaders pushed more for the perfection, right? Or at least we had different interpretations of what quality meant, right? And this actually caused a lot of confusion and a lot of issues on the team. And that was because people had a hard time understanding what should they optimize for or focus on, right? So this is something I've learned in the hard way, honestly, to something that's really important to think about before build up the engineering team as well, or at least this is very clear right from the beginning.
Awesome. No, I appreciate you jumping in there as well. I think it's I think there's some really good things that have been raised that I just would never have even thought about. So yeah, I'm glad that it's enlightened me a little bit. Just coming back to something that we discussed earlier, which was kind of how you initially kind of assess someone's way of thinking and how you can maybe identify whether that could be a match for your particular team and yeah, how things are going to change in the future. I know we mentioned like technical tests can be quite a good way of doing that. Are there any other things that people would potentially look out for, or things that people would maybe, advise people that are maybe like searching for work or something? How can you find the position that is obviously a fit for you as a hiring manager, but also from the candidate's perspective, how can they find a company that kind of matches their own values as well? Is there anything to look out for? Sorry, Esteban.
No, yeah, sure. I think I mean, I don't know what other companies are doing and what is it that they need to look for, but I think what is very important is to get a chance to actually work together in any capacity. So what we're doing, and this is similar to what Henrik was explaining, is that we have a test not just to get a test result and then say, okay, you're passing to the next stage. It's more about having a conversation. So we go into the meeting and the code is basically a starting point. So we can ask questions about the decisions that you're taking. We can ask you to do changes. And this is basically a pre-programming exercise. So you get an idea on what we value as well as a company and what we're trying to, or what you're going to stumble upon with once you start working with us. So I would say that even though a test, it sounds tedious and sometimes you need to spend time on that, that can give you a very good indication as to how the company operates, what they care about, and how is it going to be working with these individuals in the future, right? And this is something that I would value if I was going into another company. I will actually be a little bit worried as an engineer if I'm going to another company and I'm not getting my capabilities tested in any shape or form, and I don't get to actually talk to some of the engineers that I'm going to be working with on the other side.
Thank you very much. Markus, I can see you've got your hand raised there.
Yeah, like in a very concrete way, I also think it's so. As I said, we work with pair programming, so of course the hiring process is very much like grounded in pair programming, and I think for us it has helped to really keep the hiring process as close to a workday as it would normally, or a regular pairing session. Something we value a lot is that we give feedback during the actual pairing session or code test, which is usually the first part is just a small like code test, and the second part is an actual project. And I think it's so important that they know that they will get feedback regularly, and sort of noting how they. Sorry, my roommate is very loud. And sort of how they react to it and how they handle it. Because some people are very proud, of course, and if people are too proud to sort of take the feedback in a sort of conversational manner, maybe this is not the place for them, because they will have a lot of annoying conversations then. So the whole thing of keeping it as close to the like how it actually is gonna be, I think, is nice, at least for us.
Awesome. I think from my perspective, I think the main kind of core topics that I wanted to cover today have been covered, but just like keen to hear from people if there's anything else that you'd like to hear opinions of other leaders, or anything else that you'd like to kind of approach while we're here. Is there anything that people would like to raise or kind of go through whilst we're here? Markus?
Just something I thought about earlier while we talked about sort of how to move someone in a direction, in this case, from sort of being a perfectionist to a pragmatist. When you are a perfectionist, you usually know when you have to sort of cheat the system or do these little, what's it called? I was about to say hacks, but let's not use that word. I don't know what the English word is. Spring over gader lavest, like jump the lowest part of the fence. Anyway, And something that we encourage people to do is actually noting down every time they know there's going to be technical debt. So also both in the code, but also in a sort of a project management tool. So we sort of, if every time we build some technical debt, people are aware of it, they know how to fix it, but they chose not to in this moment. And I think that whole thing of reflecting on whether or not something they're making is the optimal way. Sometimes it actually leads to something being the optimal way, even though they didn't do it the way they planned or the perfect way, because it actually works. And that was my main part. It works and it doesn't need to be refactored, at least not enough that people will do it. And then we always sort of can go back to all the technical debt in sort of a maintenance period of the project.
Got it. Henrik, I can see you're got something to add there.
No, I actually just want to follow up on it, and I have something other I can take it after. But no, I very much agree with that, Markus, what you said, because that's actually, I think that's one very important thing you are aware of when you introduce something technical there, right? If you're aware of it and you know, okay, this will have an impact or contagious or like keep piling up, right? Then it's important that you're aware of this, so you know, okay, we need to tackle it at X amount of time, or if at least if this is a feature that's getting traction or whatever, right? This specific thing is not going away at least, right? That's very important to be mindful of. I think also a little from my experience, I think what I have at least seen is that many perfectionists are often afraid of making mistakes, or at least trying to optimize a lot for the future, or often, right, as well, where sometimes, as you also pointed out, sometimes you don't, my point is at least from that, you don't often know what is the right solution, right? When you're building a first version of something, you don't know what the right end result will be, right? So it's better just to get something out and then get more learnings, and then you can iterate on it or refactor it as we go, right? And this is also why I at least believe, like, my mindset here is that if I have some tests that at least cover some of the core thing is working, right, then I can confidently refactor it later on without worry about it breaking, right? I think that's the mindset I like, that it's quickly to improve on the system and not necessarily have the right thing built from day one, right? But you can actually recover later on.
Awesome. No, I really appreciate that. Esteban, I know you've got something to throw in there as well.
Yeah, I was just trying to add to what Markus was saying, is that what we do in the code is we have our own annotations, because then we do statistical analysis, but we also have like a library where you can actually search for things. And one common annotation that you're going to find is actually refactor. So what you will see is, you will see some code that was implemented, and then there will be a refactor comment saying, you know, this is not necessarily the direction that we want to take, but we're doing this because A, B, and C. And then we will create a ticket or some sort of documentation in Confluence where we will say, okay, this is the way that we want to go. And to follow up on that, of course, the more refactor comments that you find about the same topic, the more indication that, okay, this is becoming a little bit painful, so now we should try to move away from it. The other thing that we do is, and I think maybe many companies do either by not necessarily consciously about it, but we try to create an interpretation of what the ideal future would look like. So if you have all the time on the world and we think, okay, we know the customer and this is what they need, how will that actually look like? So we try to take some difficult decisions up front about the high level design, the architecture, whatever that is. So whenever we are doing the daily work, maybe we cannot change everything, but we can always make sure that we are changing something to be a little bit closer to that ideal future. And this is going back to this casing, you know, you improve 1% of the time. Every time you're working on a code, if you have the opportunity to leave it a little bit better than it used to be without having to refactor everything, then you should do it. The problem is that you're so focused on this, you know, specific problem that you might have a hard time trying to understand the big picture and what you're going to. That's why you want to have the idea of the ideal future set in stone, so you always know where you're, you know, going into. Yeah.
Got you. Becki, what about yourself?
So yeah, I agree with everything, and I think the iterative approach is always the kind of the best way, because you can kind of show the small parts of it. And I think the big thing when it comes to perfectionism, which I think we've talked about a lot, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I know we're all very pragmatists, but it's very necessary to have that approach sometimes. But when you want people to kind of be more pragmatic and kind of move them away from that, I think the iterative approach works very well, as long as you show that, you know, we can go back and change the things afterwards. So I think if you're kind of leading by, again, the example part of it, of be saying, okay, we know, you know, you've told us that this is the technical debt we're going to get, this is the problem that we're going to kind of leave behind with this. And then you show them later on in the process that we actually go back and fix that. It makes people more comfortable to actually trust the process a little bit better, so they can be pragmatic in the time that they want to be pragmatic, and they can be perfectionist when they need to be perfectionist. I think in kind of some places that I've worked, we've never gone back to the thing. We've never fixed the thing. And that makes people very stressed. And sometimes that will make them push towards more perfectionism in that moment, because they don't think we're ever going to go back to it. So I think if we can just kind of show them the process works, then I think that helps a lot in kind of moving people from one side to the other.
No, great points there. And again, it's not something that I'd considered in terms of being able to get the balance. Markus, we'll come back to you for this.
Yeah, I remember we actually had an employee at some point who was very much a perfectionist, and I learned a lot from him. I'm not a perfectionist, but I would love to be. And a part of sort of his joy in work was actually sort of polishing and refactoring stuff, which meant that we would have to, maybe it's just an anecdote, but I'm going to share it anyway because I have the talking stick. A part of his joy was actually refactoring. So we would dedicate a certain amount of hours every month for sort of perfection time or chore time. So anything that he had sort of built up as either tech debt or things that he wanted to do as chores, we could sort of dedicate some time to that. And I think that's something that we should bring into more projects, honestly, at least in what we're currently doing, to sort of have that time to also sort of go back and refactor, because I think being pragmatic and problem solvers, we are very quick to build something that works. But I think just having that like slight, like let's say a couple hours of every month, every week, maybe if you are so lucky, I think that would maybe satisfy more people, at least in our company.
Yeah, and what a nice way of being able to do it as well, like bringing out the best in somebody who's got a totally, not different skill set, but like different way of thinking. Like it really like brings out the best in everyone. Like I say, if you've got the option to do that, then it seems like a great thing to be able to do. Just conscious of time and everything, has anybody else got anything to kind of run through, any other points they wanted to raise before we got wrapped up? Esteban.
Well, I think you were maybe you can edit this part, right? But you had a question about what do you recommend to junior graduate
Yes.
engineers? Yeah.
Yeah, so I was thinking in terms of you know, somebody who's maybe recently graduated, or somebody who's, you know, done a boot camp, something like that, and now they're starting to explore the market. As we spoke about before, technical tests a lot of the time are quite difficult to, you know, tell people whether or not they should be a perfectionist or whether they should be a pragmatist or whatever it may be. How would you kind of recommend that people enter the industry? Like what kind of approach should they take?
Yeah, so I will say that be as pragmatic as possible, especially early in the career, and make sure that you try a couple of things before you start, you know, having a strong opinion towards something. I will say maybe this has nothing to do with perfectionism and pragmatism, but I do see a lot, especially in interviews, that sometimes people have a hard time to admit that they don't know something, and they might try to find a way to answer without answering. And I would say that it has much more value when you say, I don't know, but you try to figure out what is it that, you know, we're looking for. So you will ask follow-up questions. So you will try to then connect this to what we were talking about before, right? This is very much about, like what Markus is saying, is very much about, you know, when you're pair programming, you're having this exercise when you have to be very honest with each other and you have to have an agreement as what to do next, right? So you can't really sugarcoat something, or you can't really, you know, try to hide on the fact that you don't know, trying to you know, come up with an excuse or come up with something that, you know, is not really correct. So I think it's more valuable to actually try to figure something out rather than trying to, you know, come up with you know, a long answer that doesn't really say anything. And then, you know, early in the career, I will say that you know, try to maybe if I have to look back and say, if I was a junior engineer and I was trying to know what do I need to be a perfectionist with, or what do I need to take care of very carefully, and then everything else can be pragmatic, I will say, watch out with what you do with infrastructure. Try to always abstract yourself from the infrastructure. If you're accessing databases, file system, protocol frameworks, whatever that is, always put an interface, always put an abstraction layer. Make sure that that is actually something that you can switch quickly without having to refactor the whole code. That's, I would say, the common denominator that I have seen in many, many cases, especially early in the career, as to what is the biggest headache.
Awesome, thank you. And I really like the point as well about like the feedback as you go along. Like I think it relates back to what Markus was saying earlier about having really fast feedback loops. Like if you don't know the answer to something, that's okay. We'll talk about it now. Let's kind of iron that out now. We'll talk about it. If it's a gap in knowledge, you're a junior engineer, there's going to be a lot of gaps in knowledge. Let's talk about it now, and don't be afraid to ask for help. I think in engineering, I notice it a lot in my role, but especially in engineering, it's always better to admit if you don't understand something or don't know. Don't try and force something. It's sometimes a little bit of a hit on pride, but it's worth taking because it'll make you better in the long run. Sorry, Markus, we'll come to you now.
Yeah, I'm gonna vouch a bit more for the perfectionists actually now. So I've seen from some of my colleagues who are maybe they're perfectionists, maybe they're just researchers. I'm not. I'm sort of I'm gonna throw stuff at the wall and see if it works. And that's how I learned programming, and I think that's a valid way to learn programming. But I also see people who, when they don't understand something, they deep dive into it to understand it perfectly. They build it exactly how it's like mentioned in the documentation, and they, I must admit, learn better than I do in some way because they actually understand sort of the insides of what they're building. Whereas I make it work, and I make it work well, but I don't always know why, to be honest. And I think that's so interesting to sort of see that different approach. It's also with pairing, it's a very annoying pair to actually be because you have one person who wants to spend a lot of time deep diving, and you have one person who just wants to get it done. So, but I really appreciate those colleagues because I see now, after some years, that they actually have that understanding, so they can actually explain me why stuff works in a certain way.
Becki, were you going to jump in there? Sorry.
Yeah, so going back to kind of the junior developer part of it, I mean, especially now in kind of the current market, I think pragmatism is huge. I mean, I've been there. I was a bootcamp graduate 6 years ago, kind of going into the market, and one of the things that I remember then is that I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted my projects to be perfect. I wanted my portfolio to be perfect. And one of the things that I would kind of say to everyone is it's not going to be perfect. And you're just going to have to go for it because, the longer you spend trying to perfect something, the less time you're out in kind of trying to get the jobs and kind of actually getting the experience you need by getting a job and going forward. You're going to learn so much more on a job than you are going to be in school or anything like that. It's insane how quickly you learn things. So just kind of go for it and don't focus on one specific role. I know a lot of people that kind of focus on kind of like, I want to be a front-end developer, I want to be a back-end developer, I want a data engineer. And when you first kind of going into tech, you have no idea what you're going to enjoy, what you're not going to enjoy. You just want to get into tech. You will learn so much in the first years that whatever you learn is going to be a foundation for what you do later, and you can go in any direction you want. So don't be kind of wedded to one thing. Don't be too perfectionist. As everyone said, it's kind of, you tell people you don't understand, you don't know, but ask the questions. I mean, the one thing I want to see from a junior engineer in a kind of interview, if they don't know any of their kind of answers to stuff, is to ask me kind of like, oh, so how does this work? Because that means they want to learn for the next time and the next interview and the next things they're going to do. So yeah, have that first, but also be pragmatic and just try and get in there. Because like I say, once you're into the kind of ladder and the tech part of it, you can go anywhere you want. So don't kind of be too stressed about what that first role is.
Yeah, and be a sponge, right? Like you said, just if you don't know something, ask it and just keep building your knowledge that way. You guys are the experts, take it from you lot. That's the best way to go. Henrik, have you got any further points to add to that particular topic about kind of early stage careers? Anything that you'd kind of recommend to people at all?
No, I think most have been said, but yeah, the curiosity is definitely the most important thing in the start of security. I think you're curious about learning new things, right? That's at least the most important signals I'm looking for juniors, right? As you pointed out as well, Becki. I also think it's also hard now sometimes to navigate because in this whole zero interest rate environment that have been, not anymore, but have been, right? Many people are like microservices. Okay, we need to build microservices at day one, right? People are so biased towards these things, it feels, right? And then, okay, then I need to learn microservices and not that, right? Where it doesn't really matter, right? It's very few companies where it really matters to have that knowledge, for instance, right? It's not what really matters for building applications in most companies, right? So these things about, focus on what actually is important to learn.
Got it. Amazing. Well, I really appreciate that. Esteban, you got a point to raise there?
Yeah, no, I just have one comment about, why is it that many of us have said that we started as perfectionists and then we move into pragmatism. And I think, it is very much about gaining experience and becoming a more round professional, later in the career. But I would say that it looks like, most of us probably are from the same, I'm missing the word. I don't want to say age, but
generation.
Generation. Thank you very much. And I think that 15 years ago, you will still be working, depending on where you are, in a waterfall way, right? Where you have thorough function analysis, you have digital design systems, system designs, you have build timelines, you have Gantt charts, you have a very strict way of doing things. And then the solution will be perfect, but probably the customer doesn't like it or they cannot use it. And then on the other hand, we started to do more agile work where you kind of start with the goal in mind, you know where you want to go, but then you start iterating and then you're getting closer and closer to what you're looking for, right? The solution is probably clumsy. It works sometimes, it has some issues, but the customer likes it and they use it. And maybe that's why also we have moved away from perfectionism to more of a pragmatic approach in our career.
What a great point. And yeah, because perfection to you is totally a different picture of what perfection is to someone else. And what you've built pragmatically in 3 days might be perfect for what someone else wants. So yeah, I like that point. That's a really good one. But no, really appreciate that. I think yeah, like I say, I'm just conscious of time and everything. Don't want to keep everyone here for the whole evening, but do really appreciate everybody joining after a busy day at work. And I think we've all got some really good topics brought up here. I've definitely learned a lot from my perspective. I hope you all have as well. So yeah, really appreciate everyone taking the time out to join us. This will all be uploaded shortly anyway, so anyone that wants to watch it as a recording or listen to it as a podcast style as well, we will be able to. But yeah, thank you all so much for your inputs, and hopefully we'll all stay in touch and speak soon. Have a great evening, everyone. See you later.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye.